Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robbie Sobel, and today we continue our hike through Camp Crystal Lake with Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, was directed by Joseph Zito and stars Corey Feldman, Crispin Glover, Kimberly Beck, and Peter Barton. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel as we continue this hike through Camp Crystal Lake. And just a reminder, I'm not doing this hike alone. A bunch of my friends on YouTube are also dropping their reviews for every Friday the 13th movie in the entire franchise. Each Friday, we drop a review for the next movie in the series, and I highly recommend that you check out their content. You can hit up the description below and you can see the links for their channels and their videos. Everyone kind of provides a different vibe and take, not just on their opinions of each movie, but just the overall aesthetic and feel. It makes it for a good watch and a nice variety. So definitely check their content out. Alright guys, well, after the success of Friday the 13th Part 3, it was pretty clear that we were going to get yet another entry into the Friday the 13th franchise. On a budget of just over $2 million, Friday the 13th Part 3 brought in nearly $37 million. So Friday the 13th Part 4 was on its way. But this time they were ready to put a bow on Jason Voorhees and wrap things up. Tom Savini was brought back to handle the makeup the first time he came back to the franchise since the original film just a few years earlier. And they brought out a couple of big guns here, or who would later on become big guns. Corey Feldman, who was a massive star in the 1980s and into the 1990s, kind of scratched his teeth here with Friday the 13th Part 4, starring as Tommy Jarvis. Now, the Tommy Jarvis character would continue to live on in the Friday the 13th franchise in Part 5, in Part 6, and then much later on in Never Hike Alone, the critically acclaimed Friday the 13th fan film. In addition to Corey Feldman, we also have Crispin Glover, who was just 1 year away from co-starring in Back to the Future as George McFly. But before he was hanging around Doc Brown and Marty McFly, he was at Camp Crystal Lake doing his best to avoid his demise at the hands of Jason. The cool thing about Friday the 13th Part 4 is, while it's not the final chapter as it was promoted as, it really does feel like an end of an era. Now, the first film took place, of course, in 1980, and everything kind of wraps up with the death of Mrs. Voorhees. But then Friday the 13th Part 2, 3, and 4 all take place over the same weekend. So that kind of mini trilogy that's set in the middle of this franchise really feels connected and together. The vibe of all the movies are very similar. The characters and the era that it takes place all kind of link together. Everything else after this point really does feel different, starting with, of course, Part 5, which we will get into more next week, and then in the films after that as well. The thing that really stands out the most is that in the films after this, Jason is really a slow, kind of plodding zombie. He's very methodical, where in these films, he's still alive and he's still moving around fast, and there's a little bit more of a personality there with Jason. And Jason in this film was played by a veteran stuntman named Ted White, who really did a fantastic job. I know, everyone kind of puts Kane Hodder as their #1 Jason, and it's hard to compare because the way the two characters are from this point in the franchise to where Kane Hodder takes over is much different. I used to always kind of fall back and love Kane Hodder the best, but in recent years I've gone with Ted White. I feel like he's just the most complete package. Jason is very intimidating in this film. The kills are on point. Tom Savini does a fantastic job, to nobody's surprise, with the deaths and the special effects in the film. Now, after the third entry, Chris is kind of carried out of the barn. All her friends have been killed at the hands of Jason, but Jason's body is there in the barn, dead. Now, this movie picks up immediately after the events of Part 3. Jason is loaded into an ambulance and brought to the hospital in the morgue, where he's just kind of being put away like any other body would. Unfortunately for those in attendance, At the hospital, Jason is not done wreaking havoc. After killing his way through the hospital, Jason makes his walk back to his home at Camp Crystal Lake. Now, at this point in the story, we have two groups of people that are going to be important to follow. We have the Jarvis family, followed by Mrs. Jarvis, along with her daughter Trish and her son Tommy, played by Corey Feldman. Now, next to them on the other side of the lake is a whole group of friends. Crispin Glover stars as Jimmy, and he's got his friends Teddy alongside and a bunch of others who they kind of come just to have a good time at the lake. Unfortunately for them, that good time turns sour pretty quick. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details and the spoilers, but I will tell you what I liked and maybe what I didn't like about this film. The best parts about this film are the characters. When you're watching a slasher film, there's a few things that are musts. There are boxes that need to be checked off to have a successful slasher. Number one's the obvious. You have to have some TNA. You got to show some skin. You want to have that sexual appetite going over the film. You want to have some good kills. You want to have blood and guts and creative deaths to really hammer home. But you also want to have characters that you can relate to and they're fun to watch. If they're boring, you're not going to have the sex appeal there, and you're not going to have the great payoff when they do die at the hands of the killer. The best two characters in this film are Jimmy, played by Crispin Glover, and of course his best buddy, Teddy. They are really, really funny in this. They have a kind of a yin and yang dynamic where Jimmy is very reserved. He doesn't have much confidence in himself. He recently got dumped by his girlfriend, and he's just worried that no girl's ever going to really like him. And on the other side, you have Teddy that's always just busting his chops, busting his balls a little bit, telling him not to be a dead fuck. That's kind of the running gag throughout this movie, and any fans of the Friday the 13th franchise will always kind of throw that slogan out there. Don't be a dead fuck. And I am guilty of using that in my personal life, having a little fun and joking around with the guys as well. Corey Feldman as Tommy Jarvis, very relatable, especially if you are younger. He's a big horror fan. He's really into video games. He's a mask maker. And anyone who's watching these films who's a big-time horror fan is instantly going to relate to Tommy Jarvis. Even if you're older. I'm 36, going to be 37. I look at Tommy and I see a lot of myself when I was his age. Especially, there's a time when across from them, Tommy's looking through the window and through the blinds, and he sees a couple, a teenager, a guy and a girl, kind of fooling around, and he's getting excited. He just wants to see her get naked, wants to see her boobs and take her top off, and then he hears the door kind of get rattled, and his mom's about to walk in, so he jumps back in bed, puts the covers over him, and pretends to be sleeping. She peeks out of the corner of her eye, and she kind of notices what he was looking at, but she doesn't say anything. She's a good mom, and she plays it cool. Very relatable. So you have Tommy Jarvis, kind of that younger innocence that's relatable to the viewer, and then characters like Teddy and Jimmy, who represent more of that college age that we can relate to as well, especially someone like myself in their 30s who kind of looks back at these different eras of my life, and I can see myself as 12-year-old Tommy. I can see myself in the role of Jimmy getting my heart broke, and then I can see myself in the role of Teddy just busting chops a little bit and having a little fun, not caring about too much and just wanting to have a good time. In another way that this film ties itself together with the two previous entries, there's a character of Rob who's hitchhiking trying to find his sister Sandra, who had been killed in part 2. Now, we all remember Sandra. She won the Deadliest Diva Award for Friday the 13th part 2, and she was killed screwing around with her boyfriend Jeff. They got the shish kebab kill, and her brother Rob is looking for her, and he kind of helps Trish along and kind of links up with her. And unfortunately, when Jason makes his way back to Crystal Lake, Rob is met with a pretty rough demise. A lot of people laugh at it because there's a scene when he's getting killed by the machete, and he's just kind of screaming out to Trish, "He's killing me! He's killing me!" People kind of laugh at that. I think they laugh at it because it's uncomfortable, and if they were in that position, they'd do the exact same thing. A lot of people laugh at horror films as their way to kind of deflect away from the fact that it makes them uncomfortable. You see that a lot with younger kids if you go to the movie theater and there's deaths on screen, especially like the guys, the boys who were young teens are going to laugh about it because they want to feel kind of macho, especially if they're hanging out with some girls that they chill with. They don't want to seem like they're showing any emotion, but yeah, no, that shit's uncomfortable. And when you look at it back now as you get a little bit older, like that's really just a sad scene. Now, the end of this film is pretty bonkers, and we have to give credit to the one, the only, the great, the classic Tom Savini. Towards the end of this film, Tommy sees these news clippings of Jason and finds out that he was killed as a young boy and puts two and two together. He actually shaves his head very fast, by the way. We'll have to chalk that up to movie magic and suspending our disbelief. That's fine. And he distracts Jason enough to kind of get his attention away from his sister, and he goes to town on him with a machete over and over, and he's just screaming, "Die! Die! Die!" And Jason falls head first on this machete, and it completely impales him through the front of his face, through the back. It is brutal. Jason's face is completely mangled up. It looks obviously different than it did in part 3 and much different than it did in part 2. But that's all stuff you're just going to have to wash over and get over it. All right, guys, it's time for the fun stuff. The
coolest kill.
In Friday the 13th, part 4, final chapter, well, instead of Jason doing the work this time, he's on the receiving end. Tommy Jarvis killing Jason Voorhees. Boom! This is vicious. This is great stuff. This is Tom Savini at his peak. The machete directly through the head. It's brutal looking no matter how many times you see it. It's totally worth a watch. It's one of the best deaths of a killer in any slasher film, and it holds up 37 years later. All right, my absolute favorite part of these review series, that's right, the Deadliest Diva. This time we're going to change it up just a little bit. The Deadliest Divas. That's right. The twins, these girls are smoking hot. I love these pink little cotton tops that they have. It really gives you a nice little tease. And I know especially when Jimmy and Teddy see them, boy, they were just popping boners left and right, I bet. That look on a girl, it just gives you that tease. It makes you want more. It makes you just want to rip that top off and just kind of motorboat them and just fooling around. And, you know, on top of that, man, they had cute little butts on them. They had these great big old smiles. And that's what you want to see in a slasher film. You know, you want to kind of jump into the mindset of being in your early to mid 20s, and you want to see the girls that you would just dream of fooling around with. And that's what we get with these two girls. Both of them are pretty dynamite, I must say. I'm not going to go the full Monty on them. I'm not going to go, a 10 out of 10, but I will settle in on pretty close. The Deadliest Divas of Friday the 13th, Part 4, the twins, 9 out of 10. All right, guys, as far as my final rating, I always like to put up the Rotten Tomato score so we can kind of see the consensus from both the critics and the audience. And once again, I think that both sides are nuts. I'll throw it up right over here. The Rotten Tomato score for Friday the 13th, Part 4, Final Chapter, 20% on the critic score and only 51% on the audience score. That is insane to me. Not only is Friday the 13th Part 4 the best Friday the 13th in this entire franchise, most likely anyway, wait for my ranking, but it's arguably one of the best and most complete slashers of all time. You have the kills, you have the TNA, you have the great characters, you have the good atmosphere in Camp Crystal Lake, you have a good pacing. The films are a little over 90 minutes, so it's not a slog, it's not dragging. This film's got it all. The critics at 20%, boom, they totally lost their mind. And the audience at 41%, they must not be horror fans, because if they were, they would be bumping that score up quite a bit. For me, Friday the 13th Part 4, a final chapter, gets a perfect 5 out of 5 star rating. All right, guys, thanks for checking out the channel. If you like this video, hit like. If you loved it, you can subscribe. And of course, you can visit me on Twitter and Instagram at RankingsRS. I'll see you next week as we continue our journey through Camp Crystal Lake. Thanks for checking out the channel, and keep watching movies.